I pop my fatty acids and I use the liquid in my fatty acids to put on my face every night before I go to bed. So this is phenomenal. I also put them on my feet and put socks on. It's all food-based. Remember, I always say don't put anything on your face that you can't not eat. And I'm gonna look all shiny. And my face is as soft as a baby's butt. So if you're having an awesome day, first and foremost, welcome to my kitchen, or as I like to call it, my classroom. You always know when I pull my hair back that I'm gonna get really serious about a subject here. But we get a lot of questions about fasting, about ketosis, about keto diets, about phase 3 of the Fast Metabolism Diet, and weight loss resistance, carb resistance. So I just wanted to kind of take it down a little bit. There's some really cool science that it's kind of like in the supplement world. There's cool nutrients and people nutrient studies, and people, grab onto that study, put a teeny tiny bit of it in the bottle and make the label really sexy and sell it for all kinds of things. It's definitely the same way in the weight loss world and in the nutrition world now, unfortunately, where there'll be a little bit of science that comes out about something and then they take it and create this kind of extreme version of it and stress the body. The body has movement, maybe not in a healthy way, and we kind of call that success. So I just want to talk a little bit about burning fat when you have it stored and burning fat when you consume it. So all of us are familiar with what we call a fat cell, okay? So I'm going to make this fat cell, and in our fat cell, we store these little things. They are, I use a different color maybe. They are called triglycerides. And you guys might know about triglycerides if you've ever had a lab test or if they ever talk about cardiovascular tests. Triglycerides live inside fat cells, but they also travel through the bloodstream. And people get very nervous when triglycerides are traveling through the bloodstream because they can contribute to the cause of soft plaque or blockage of the arteries. And so people can get really concerned with triglycerides. I'm going to tell you where the name comes from, triglycerides. See these little 3 things attached to this little round bubble? I want you guys to know this because I want you to think about this when you eat. A triglyceride is a glyceride, which is a sugar, and tri is 3 fats. So we actually have fatty acids, 3 of them, that are attached to a sugar. I want you to be a smarty farty the next time you go to the doctor and they talk about your cholesterol and your triglycerides. And I want you to say, oh my goodness, I have elevated triglycerides in the bloodstreams. That means I have an abundance of energy just waiting to be converted, because our body takes triglycerides and it breaks them down in the fat cells through a process called lipolysis. Lipolysis. Polysis is always like think about like lysis is always popping. Polysis is the release of the sugars in the cell, the sugar and the fat. So if you feel like you are storing historical weight on the belly, on the thighs, under the bra strap, don't give yourself a hard time. Just talk to yourself and say, body, I think it's time we give the thought and the theory and the scientific fact of lipolysis a little bit more attention. This is your friend, lipolysis. Lipolysis goes in and it breaks up this marriage of fats and sugars, and it makes, and I stick with my color code, it makes the fatty acids available for metabolism, and it makes the sugars available for metabolism. So our body will take these fatty acids and it will take these sugars up into the cell. It'll take them into so if you imagine, how's it going, guys? Everybody with me? Everybody ready to be the lipolysis queen? Okay? Don't stress about saddlebags, just focus on learning about lipolysis and how we can help it and how we can also not prevent it, right? So it'll take it into the bloodstream, these lipids. I'm gonna stick with same color here, and sugars. It'll take it into the cell. It'll take it into they call it the cytoplasma of the cell. Think of it as like jello, the jello of the cell, which actually it's kind of interesting because we kind of think of it as jello of the cell, but there's a lot that actually goes on there. And from the jello of the cell, it'll take it into what you guys hear a lot about is the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. We have more mitochondrial tissue on our heart than any other tissue in the entire body. It's one theory that they talk about the heart being the least organ to have cancers, things like that. But this is the path that we want to happen. When we have stored fat, there are things that cause fat to store, and there are things that cause lipolysis or fat to be released. Fat stores, you guys all got this really quick? I'm gonna erase here for a second. Fat stores in adipocytes or fat cells when we have more sugars. These are like little sugars now, hanging out in our bloodstream. When they start to get at an elevated level, our body will then go and store it into fat cells. When they start to get at a low level, sometimes our bodies will grab everything that it can and store it into fat cells. This is crisis fat storage. And this can be an overabundance of sugars, but it can also be because it can't make it here. And so I want to talk about this area. That's why I left it there and I didn't erase it. So we want sugars, again, to be taken up into the cell, into the mitochondria, to be broken down because it gives us like crazy energy, right? There is a process, and you guys have probably heard the word insulin, right? There is a process where insulin kind of opens the front door. Imagine a nice double door opening and allowing you nutrients into the fat cells to be into the cell to be burned for fat. So insulin is like the key that opens those doors. So when we talk about sugar in the bloodstream, and this is in the form of complex carbohydrates, but remember, proteins can cause insulin secretion, a little bit less. Fats, definitely lipids cause insulin secretion. Carbohydrates cause insulin secretion. Complex carbohydrates, like let's say you have 20 grams of sugar in a piece of bread, but it's sprouted bread. The rate in which the sugar is delivered takes much longer, so we get a much more stable delivery of sugars than if it's refined white bread, especially if you add riboflavin to it, which is kind of a funny thing because they enriched that so that it was legal to sell in the United States. However, that actually stimulates the rate of sugar delivery, so totally a bad deal, public health. Anyway, you get a spike of sugar and the body goes, oh no, we don't want sugar out of that normal range. It does a lot of things. That causes inflammation, that causes clogging of the arteries. It causes the capillaries in your eyes and your fingers and your toes to not be able to get adequate bloodstream. It's like sludge in the blood now. So the body says, quick, let's store it for fat. And then what happens is a lot of times we get a low or an ebb and we get what we call dysglycemic or hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. And the body says, uh-oh, this might happen. They may be starving us for sugar because remember, sugar feeds the brain, the muscle, and the heart, and the liver. So it says, I better store some for later. So what we want is this nice sweet spot right here where our body consumes natural sugars in the form of fruits and vegetables and grains. We need complex carbohydrates. We're going to talk about that in a second. And lipids. Lipids are also converted and broken down, right, in the body, and it causes not only insulin output, but we're going to talk about the next enzyme in just a second. But we want a nice, sweet, consistent stream of nutrients in the body, which is one reason why I am a strong proponent for eating 5 times a day and not for fasting. What happens when the body, if you put the body in a starvation state, like we're going to use ketosis, ketotic state, the insulin level is so low for so long that the body starts a new process where it burns fat for fuel and for energy. It's a crisis mechanism that we have to survive, famine, if we get lost out in the woods, things of that nature. The problem with that is that if you ever plan on eating again, it downregulates your metabolic rate of burn, and the process of ketosis is very, very hard on the organs. So I'm going to talk for a second about, we know now what can kind of cause stuff to store into fat cells. And that is these two, I'm going to call it two things. One, spikes. There's actually three things. Two, insulin imbalance. So a lot of people say, drive insulin low, drive insulin low. Insulin keeps us alive, guys. And what we want is we want insulin sensitivity. So we want the insulin that we produce to be powerful. We want the receptor sites on our cell walls to be super receptive. We want there not to be, like if you imagine again a lock and a key, we want there not to be gum in the lock, which is when our receptor sites get stagnant, and we don't want the key to have blunt edges, which is when like you have to jiggle your key and jiggle your lock. We want it to be this very smooth process. So remember when I say this, that insulin is a hormone, okay? And then the third one, when we talk about how we prevent, again, effectiveness of insulin, spikes, so stable blood sugar. And the third one here is we want to talk about enough ability to break down fats. So we're going to look at enzyme production. Okay, so there's a lot that I can say about insulin. We could do a whole class on insulin. What I want us to kind of agree to here for a second is that insulin is a hormone. It's produced by the pancreas, primarily produced by the pancreas. It has receptor sites all over the place. And the key to insulin is making insulin a healthy hormone. So we have metabolites of hormones, and hormones can get wonky. Like when I talked to you guys about the thyroid hormone, how we can get T4 converted into T3 in a healthy manner, or T4 converted into T3 in a weird bond angle. Insulin's the same way. We want to have healthy production. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. But the biggest and most important thing with insulin is that we have stability, effectiveness, and that our receptor sites are clean. So there's a lot of things and a lot of nutrients, but consistent eating and the style of eating and reducing inflammation are kind of the keys we're finding from a science perspective to having healthy insulin. So when you talk about an individual that's diabetic, dysglycemic, hypoglycemic, that is a hormone metabolic disorder. And a lot of people think that insulin is because we eat too much sugar, but insulin isn't, or diabetes is because we eat too much sugar. It's actually because the cell is starving for sugar. The brain doesn't say that there's been enough sugar taken up into the cell to be metabolized. So the body keeps sugar in the bloodstream to try and save our lives. So insulin isn't sugar excess, it's the inability to get sugar up into the cell. That's why they give insulin, or they used to give a horrible drug called metformin. Metformin was designed to make insulin more sensitive, and obviously insulin is designed to the injections or the infusions of insulin are designed to put insulin into the body and create, like, kind of bust down the doors and open those sugars to be metabolized. Okay, so let's talk about spikes here for a second. So spikes come from, having frequent consumption of food. I'd rather you have lower portions and eat more frequently than a higher portion and, say I'm so full, I'm going to skip my snack. So if you're finding that at all, that like breakfast feels too big, lunch feels too big, dinner feels too big, I'd rather you take part of that portion and use it as your snack as opposed to going for long periods. It's the rate of delivery that creates stability. And again, the stability is where we're going to have the best metabolism or the best metabolic function in burning fat for fuel and not storing fat. So spikes can also come in food combining. So with the Fast Metabolism Diet, and also a lot in the cleanse and in Metabolism Revolution, I do a variety of different food combining to have certain targeted micronutrients be high at different levels of time so that we can encourage a lot of different enzyme production. So I'm going to use phase 3 of the Fast Metabolism Diet for a second. That is the phase where we combine complex carbohydrates and healthy fats. In phase 1, we do a lot of complex carbohydrates like mangoes, pineapple, watermelon, brown rice, oatmeal, but we leave out the healthy fats. And the reason why we do that is so that we give the body an opportunity to relearn how to metabolize complex carbohydrates without having a heavy secretion of certain enzymes that actually burn fat more efficiently. Lipids or fats are what they call hydrophobic, meaning they're afraid of water. So they have a tendency, have you guys ever taken a glass of water and put some oil in it and you see the bubbles where the oil is walling itself off and running away from the water? It's hydrophobic, it's afraid of water. One thing that you can do in a science experiment is you can put some detergent in there or hand soap, and you'll see those big, large globules of fat turn into teeny little bubbles, and those are what's called surfactants, and it breaks down the body's desire to wall off fat. Some of our natural surfactants, soaps, if you will, or detergents, if you will, in our body are things called bile salts. Bile, a lot of people think of bile when they get nauseous or sick to their stomach, or if you've had a cholecystectomy or a gallbladder removal, you've probably heard the word bile. If you had morning sickness, you're probably very aware of the word bile. Bile is produced, but it's usually housed in the gallbladder, and then whenever you eat lipids, the body triggers to release it into the small intestine, because we'll talk about fat metabolism in a second. So if you imagine that you have no gallbladder, the bile is no longer housed in the gallbladder, it's just constantly released to the small intestine. So one of the reasons why individuals have a difficult time with weight loss after a gallbladder being removed is that we never get the surfactants, enough of the natural body soap, into the small intestine where we break down our lipids to break down fat efficiently for consumption, so the body will go into that storage mode that I talked about with lipolysis. So bile salts, pancreatic enzymes, digestive enzymes, all of these enzymes are really dependent on what you're consuming. So when you consume complex carbohydrates, the body will produce more amylase, things that break down complex carbohydrates, than lipase, things that break down lipids. So, and it's really hard to get, there's plant-based enzymes and there's animal-based enzymes. It's really hard to get enough pancreatic support in a plant-based enzyme. So sometimes we'll supplement with enzymes there if a person's really struggling. But okay, so let's talk about enzyme production. Now we know we need to keep our blood sugar stable. We know we don't need spikes, and we know we need to work on our hormones in order to burn fat, in order for lipolysis. Before I go into enzymes, let me talk about 3 things that slow lipolysis down. The first one is cortisol. Has anybody ever heard of cortisol? People think cortisol is bad. Cortisol is awesome. Cortisol can actually help you burn fuel for energy, usually in the form of glycogen or sugar storage in the liver and in the muscle. That's why if you get like really scared and you run super fast, you feel like quivery, or your muscles feel quivery. Have you guys ever had that feeling before? It's because you're snatching really quick that sugar that's stored for crisis. Elevated and sustained levels of cortisol will slow lipolysis so that the body will have this really gem of energy to deal with as a secondary fat source. So the things that stimulate it is actually endorphins. So things that happen with fun, joy, sex. Endorphins actually can stimulate fat burn or lipolysis and can actually help create a healthy cortisol balance. So when you have sustained stress for a long period of time, and one thing that we're finding now, which is kind of interesting with a lot of the fasting or the diets that push the body into ketosis, is we're finding that the lipid cells actually become smaller, but they become very, very hard. And so when they stretch out later in life, it's really, 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 really hard to lose the weight. So we want to try to lose weight in a time of joy. Now it sounds funny because usually during a time of joy, you got a margarita in one hand, maybe a chocolate cake in the other. But So if you're stressed and you're struggling and you're stuck on weight loss and you don't feel like you're mastering lipolysis, I want you to do anything and everything you can to lower your cortisol level. One of the reasons why I say pleasure stimulates weight loss and stress is fattening, right? So that's why we do things like alternate nostril breathing, dry skin brushing, why we do things like massage during phase 3, right? Because I'm trying to lower your cortisol levels so you become the queen of lipolysis. Another thing, again, that we kind of went over this a little bit, but that will slow lipolysis, so the breakdown of lipids, is actually a deficiency in healthy fats. So there's a big fad, I've been doing this a long time, of low-fat diets. It was crazy there for a while. And there's still some out there that break my heart, but the essential and healthy fatty acids, things that you get from sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, if you do nuts, things like cashews, almonds, Brazil nuts, pistachios, all in the raw form, those will help promote lipolysis, and actually a deficiency in those will halt or slow lipolysis. One thing that happens definitely in the American diet is we have a tendency to get very high fat. Our fats come from animal sources. And so that's why I always caution women in taking an omega-3 that's animal-based, like a salmon oil. We find that when men have more muscle mass, they have a tendency to have the benefits from salmon oil. But when women and our different complexity of hormones can take animal-based fats and turn it into a pro-inflammatory hormone or convert it into what's called arachidonic acid. You guys don't have to worry about that. But again, go into inflammation. Remember, when we have inflammation, we dull the key. We totally mess up insulin. Its ability to be produced in a healthy factor, its ability to have healthy receptor sites, and so healthy fats are really important. The other thing that will halt lipolysis is, I'm going to call it dysglycemia, your sugars being off, okay? Either high or low. So when we first drew a picture, and I drew what was inside a fat cell, remember, inside a fat cell had these little bubbles with 3 little legs, which are triglycerides. I'm going to bring this plane in for a landing here and hopefully knit this all together, okay? This is sugars, remember, an imbalance in sugars. This is fats, remember these are essential fatty acids. And then cortisol is and again, there's a whole cascade of hormones, but I'm going to cause cortisol, is like the bouncer at the nightclub, or the person that's counting how many people, the fire marshal that's counting how many people can be in a concert hall. So cortisol is, again, not a bad thing, but if you've got it out of control, it's going to inhibit this. And if you've got an imbalance of healthy fats from a consumption perspective, or the wrong ratios of fats, or if you have dysglycemia with sugars. So again, I'll bring this ginormous plane in for a landing and bring it into like our life right now with the Fast Metabolism Diet. So the Fast Metabolism Diet is all about looking at different pathways that we can nurture back to health, and that we can heal to the point of having the most efficient and healthy metabolism. Because remember, the metabolism affects every aspect of your life. It's not just about weight loss. It's about health gain. It's about food allergies, autoimmune disorders, bleeding disorders. It's about strong bone density and healthy hormones. So on phase 3 of the Fast Metabolism Diet, we combine complex carbohydrates. Oops, got a little, I was going to go CHO, and then I decided to spell carbs. I'm going to teach you a little trick here. And healthy fats. Say one little thing about healthy fats. Remember, the fats are the building blocks for all of your hormones: estrogens, progesterones, testosterones. So if you don't feel like you have a libido, if your hair is thinning, if you don't have good bone density, mineralocorticoids, if you're having, that regulates blood pressure. Glucocorticoids, that regulates insulin, blood sugar, allergies. If any of you guys have seasonal allergies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the last one is your vitamin D metabolism. Okay, so when we talk about healthy fats, super, super important that we break these down, that we don't store them, that we use them as building blocks to manufacture all these groovy things. So if you think about that, the complex carb is the gas in your car. Now, you need these. Your brain needs these. Your sex hormones need these. In order to get to where you want to get in any aspect of health, you need these. We just have to be able to metabolize these. Some people say in phase 3, I don't lose weight. In phase 3, I even gain weight. If that's the case, you want to work on the liver, because we're talking about enzymes, the pancreas, because we're talking about enzymes, P-A-N-C-R, sorry. And you also want to maybe be a little bit more strategic, and this is for my lovely ladies and gentlemen that have maybe no gallbladder, on how you put your carbs and how you put your fats together. So if you are doing a fat and a complex carb in a meal, you might want to separate that by an hour if you're struggling. If you are needing to do, if you're stuck, and we have metabolism enzymes. You have seen all the videos that I do with this, just burning through oatmeal. You want to secrete your own enzymes efficiently or supplement with enzymes. You do not want to get rid of the carb. You want to become the lipolysis queen, right? You want to be able to break down fats. The other thing is lots of herbs and spices. Those have the phytonutrients in them. So don't shy away. If you do the 10-day cleanse, in the second half of the cleanse, after we've really nurtured the liver, we add the complex carbs and the healthy fat. And if your weight loss plateaus, that's okay. If it goes up, that's okay. It's just telling us that we need to add more nutrients, not take out the carbs and the fats, maybe separate them throughout the day so that we don't have so much enzyme output, but that we have them in a way that we can actually use them. Okay, so we'll go here for a second. Go with me, because we're gonna land this plane really quick. Essential fatty acids are the building blocks for all of our hormones. Remember, hormones like insulin regulate whether we burn fat or not. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and vitamin D metabolism is based on whether we have healthy essential fatty acids or not in our diet. If you have done a lot of animal-based proteins for an extended period of time, if you are not pro-inflammatory, like, yay, let's all sign up and vote for inflammation, but if your body is goes towards inflammation easily. Mine, I have a genetic SNP, MTFHR, that makes me just think that inflammation's awesome. Top that with an autoimmune disorder. My body thinks that inflammation is awesome. I have to supplement with essential fatty acids. There is not enough food that I can get in my body with the way my genetics work in order to burn fat efficiently. How do I know this? How do I see this? I've lived it, right? But I'm also a super big blood chemistry geek. So for me, whenever I start to lose weight, my serum, my blood level of triglycerides will elevate. My body has a hard time burning fats. In our clinic, when we have people with elevated triglycerides come in the door, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. You guys, I get that sometimes. You guys will go and you say, oh my gosh, I was so excited. I went to the doctor. I just lost 20 pounds on the Fast Metabolism Diet. And I went in and my triglycerides and cholesterols were a little high. And we go, hold on, you're working through the healing of the metabolism. Your body's now got into the serum. We're working on breaking it down efficiently. As you get into that next cycle, let's wait 4 to 6 weeks and retest them. As you get into that next cycle of healing your metabolism, those should stabilize. Because I have an autoimmune disorder, because weight gain has always been really easy for me, because my family has a history. I have a history of ovarian cysts. My family have a history. I started researching and studying supplementing with fatty acids back before I had children. So I take our fatty acids And for me, I did a lot of research because when I started looking at the genetics and the genetic expression in my family before pregnancy, I realized that our family is really prone to stretch marks. And a lot of that is remember how I said you want a nice, healthy, these cell walls right here are actually made up of little lipids of our essential fatty acids. And when these are really healthy, our body these lipid membranes get really healthy. And if you ever study dark field microscopy, you can see healthy lipid membranes in cells, and the cells are like really buoyant, and you can see stuff, nutrients coming into the cell and the body. It's just like an amazing process. When they're not healthy, they can get like really flat and really kind of sharp looking. It's really interesting in dark field microscopy. So our body makes up these lovely lipid layers by consuming the fatty acids. And it also regulates collagen and elastin production, or our stretchability in the body. And so I actually started first researching supplementing with fatty acids when I was my sisters and I all got pregnant at the same time, and I didn't want to get stretch marks. So we supplement with essential fatty acids when individuals are pro-inflammatory, when there's hormone imbalance, when there's an elevated of triglycerides, or when the body has a hard time burning fat for fuel. It's like the check mark, burning fat for fuel when you consume a complex carbohydrate in combination. So these are people that do, unfortunately, do well on a super low fat diet, or they say I do really well on no carb diet, and I lose weight. As soon as I marry those together, which is the key to healing the metabolism and long-term health, because again, remember all those things that are manufactured from that. I mean, it's fine if you don't want any sex hormones and you don't want any anti-inflammatory hormones and you want to have allergies. I guess you could do it that way. But these are what I look for when I have someone come into the office and we consider supplementing with fatty acids. Number one is inflammation. We have seen many studies on essential fatty acids and the reduction of the prostaglandins that are pro-inflammatory. The issue that I have concern with is that a lot of people use the salmon oil. There's toxicity issues and things like that. But when working in the fertility industry, we are really studying the hormones, the prostaglandins, and how they affect when we deal with pro and anti-inflammatory. And we find that women have a tendency to convert the omega-3 from salmon oils into they can, if they're out of balance, which a lot of individuals, when they're dealing with fertility and we're dealing with hormone drugs, we create an imbalance to maybe hyperstimulate. They can turn it into a pro-inflammatory or arachidonic acid. So I don't supplement with, I only supplement with plant-based essential fatty acids. The other piece that we see is elevated triglycerides. So again, if the body is leaving these triglycerides to float around in the bloodstream and it can't promote the breaking of the sugar and the fat for metabolism, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to clog the arteries, or it's going to create adipocytes or a proliferation of fat cells. Usually, clinically, I find that a person starts spiking their triglycerides when they're pre-diabetic too. So you'll see like an elevated hemoglobin A1C. The third thing when we talk about supplementing is a person that has weight loss resistance when they combine carbohydrates and a fat, and I'm going to call it a healthy fat, okay? When we put that nutrient in, it helps to hyperproduce the enzymes that stimulate lipolysis. I've gotten rid of my lipolysis bubble. Erica asked me, do you chew the fatty acids? I chew my fatty acids. Some people swallow them. I'm a big fatty acid chewer. I don't know if you guys have seen our fatty acids. They're omega-3, 6, and 9s. I like to chew my fatty acids. The other thing, you can see, I didn't put face makeup on, so I want to show you. I pop my fatty acids, and I use the liquid in my fatty acids to put on my face every night before I go to bed. So this is phenomenal. I also put them on my feet and put socks on. It's all food-based. Remember, I always say don't put anything on your face that you can't not eat. Then I'm gonna look all shiny. And my face is as soft as a baby's butt.